Hi, good evening, everyone, and welcome to this wonderful evening to celebrate what we call the power of writing. And I cannot think of a better way to begin than quote one of my very favorite women writers, Maya Angelou. Words are things. Some days we'll be able to measure the power of words. I think they are things. They get on the walls, they get in your wallpaper, they get in your rugs, in your upholstery, and your clothes, and finally into you. So Maya Angelou's words resonate with what the CEPT Essay Prize set out to do, get young minds to write, to put pen on paper. So much so they get inside every aspect of their lives. For writing, as Jacques Derrida, the famous philosopher, said, insists. This is a personal privilege for me as a faculty of CEPT University, because many, many years ago, Professor Srivatsan, Dr. Kaivan Mehta, and I took a small step towards architectural writing. We did a summer school in the year 14, I think. And subsequently, the CEPT Essay Prize was instituted in 2018, with the three of us again anchoring. So I think we are the awesome threesome, as they say. The first round of the Essay Prize received 92 entries, which was a wonderful response. We were not expecting that at all. I mean, Professor Srivatsan and I would, every 10 entries, and he would say, okay, we've got 20, we've got 30, and then we've got 40, and then finally. So what happened was that the first round of the Essay Prize, after we received the entries, we had a wonderful review team of the internal faculty consisting of Professor Pratyush Shankar, Professor Urvi Desai, Catherine L. Dunca, and Professor Kanika Singh from Ashoka University. She runs the writing center out there. So this was a very interesting faculty group that sort of sifted through the abstracts. And then these selected candidates wrote their final essays, and then we sent it to a jury consisting of three very eminent members. We had Sri Gautam Bhatia, Professor Adnan Morshid, and Dr. Tridip Surhud. So the essay committee is happy to announce that the jury we are now instituting this essay prize at CEPT, and we are now on to the second round of the essay prize, which is a wonderful step that is taken by the university. So the essay prize committee, is happy to announce that the jury for the 2019 Essay Prize will consist of the architect and writer Romi Khosla, Professor Adnan Morshid, and Dr. Tridip Surhud again. Now, the prize promotes the larger mandate of the university, which is to introduce writing across programs. That has now gained momentum with a whole new team of faculty that improves writing and conceptual skills in the undergraduate and the postgraduate programs. So it is an exciting new initiative, and I'm very happy to have you all here to honor our prize winners and to listen to Dr.Arshia Sattar, who is our special invitee to deliver the first public lecture as part of the Essay Prize. So it is my pleasure and privilege to now invite Dr. Sattar to release the book that, let me just sort of say a little about the publication. We were supposed to have Dr. Bimal Patel. He should be here anytime, so we will have him as soon as he comes on board. So the idea is that we not only honor the Essay Prize winners, but we also honor the first 10 selected essay prizes, so which is like an incentive that is offered to the participants, which is a very nice feeling for them as well. So, and this goes through an intense exhaustive editorial process, which was made possible by Soumya from Das from the publications, and of course our dear Tridip. So this whole, the jury and the review team and the three of us selected the first 10 essays, and then we brought it out as a whole CEPT Essay Prize book. And this is something that we plan to continue every year, so that it encourages more and more students, it's not just about winning, but it's also about writing and getting your work published. So, you know, and young people, when they get published, they get really motivated. So that's the whole idea. So I would now request Dr. Arshia Sattar and Kevan and Tridip and Professor Srivatsan to come and please release the CEPT Essay Prize book. Please come on stage. I would now, Arshia, I'm sorry, we will not allow you to sit for long. You'll have to keep getting up. So we would now like, but please sit. So this is just a home crowd, so yeah. Yeah, so I would now like to you know, go ahead with the prize-winning, you know, event, so to say. So we will, we have won, of course, the first prize. Now, the jurors decided that they will not have a second prize because the first prize essay was so good that it was unanimously decided that they would only have one first prize, and the other three would be who were equally good. But they sort of felt that we would have three special mentions. So we were supposed to have first, second, and third, but you know, they sort of equated, and it was very difficult for them to choose between the four, right? So we have, let me invite Monish Zaveri. Arshia, please come and do the honors of giving away the prizes. And Monish is one of the special mentions of the prize. His essay was Welcome to Donna's Machine, and which is part of the, now Monish is a CEPT graduate.
Just convocated.
Okay. So this is the problem when you see too many of them graduating. Yeah. Congratulations, Monish. Is Kasturi here? Yeah. So Kasturi found her name and her essay in the first 10 of the Essay Prize book. And so we'd like to honor her as well with a participation appreciation. Congratulations. Thank you so much. Congratulations again. And now, last but not the least, unfortunately, the other winners couldn't make it. So, you know, they're in different parts of the world. So we only have, you know, a few of them. But we'll be sending their certificates and books, okay? So the last but not the least is the first prize. So goes to Krishna Priya Rajshekhar. Her essay was on riding the winds of change on the Kochi Biennale, right? Okay. Now, KP is being presented with a check, of course, of a large amount. The CEPT Essay Prize book, and a book of publication, Buildings of Fire. But most importantly, she is our very own MArch student. So it's a matter of huge pride for us that she won the prize, and she's now teaching at the Mysore Wadiyar School of Architecture. She's on faculty there, and we're immensely proud of you. Thank you so much, and congratulations. Yeah. So, a total of 10 essays were selected, like I said, and now I'd like to Kevan to come up and do the honors of announcing the 2019 Essay Prize theme, which we are all waiting for. It'll go up on the website on Monday, or actually live right now. Yeah, right now. So, Kevan.
Thanks, Seema. Thank you very much. But before I start it, what I would really like to do is invite Krishna Priya once again on the stage, and we would like to hear from her this sort of experience of writing the essay and what it means to get this prize for you. So Krishna Priya.
Good evening, everyone. My mother had asked me to prepare for such an event, and as usual, I didn't listen to her, and as usual, she's right. So, yeah, so, I mean, I participated because I was absolutely sold on just the theme itself, House of Mirrors. I mean, there's so many ways in which it could be interpreted. And when I started out, I started out with the intent of I'm just going to write. I didn't know what I was going to write about. But one thing that I really wanted to do was, like start some sort of discussion on cities that are not spoken about so much in our context, especially in India. Like, so having studied in CEPT, I'm quite used to a lot of discussion on Ahmedabad, a lot of discussion on Delhi, a lot of discussion on Bangalore even, but not a lot on Mysore or Cochin for that matter. And those are cities that I'm familiar with. Mysore is a city where I studied. Cochin is a city that I've been visiting ever since the Art Biennale started, because I was quite fascinated by the whole, how the city transforms just for a while and then goes back to, normal, like nothing ever changed. So I was hoping that, I could maybe begin some sort of dialogue on how the art culture in Cochin and the yoga culture in Mysore are, it says that it's doing a lot for the city in terms of, tourism and revenue and whatnot, but in my very personal and humble opinion, it is a sort of recolonization that is taking place, especially in the place where I live, Gokulam. It is like the yoga hub of not just Mysore, South India. Everybody comes to Gokulam during the summer for yoga. And you've got Mysore just going out of its way to make sure that this happens. And besides that, the city in itself is pretty detached from this whole thing. So, I've tried exploring that a little bit in my essay, and hopefully everyone here gets to read it, because I would really like to hear back on, whether it's just me who thinks this way, or it's like a wider phenomenon. But more than anything else, I think, and also since I'm teaching now, that's something that I experienced as a student and something that I hear from my students. Any kind of research begins with reading Western authors and saying that I'm reading a lot of Western scholarship and I'm not quite sure how it works in the Indian context. So I think it's up to us to create that scholarship instead of just cribbing about it the entire time. So let's generate that scholarship, and I hope I can make a contribution to that along with a lot of other people. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Krishna Priya. To announce the next topic, which in a way sort of takes on from the first topic, is that one area of interest or focus for the CEPT Essay Prize will be the context of Asia, South Asia, the sense of the Indian subcontinent. And I think it's important to note here also, in the context of what Krishna Priya mentioned at the end, I think the sense of looking at Asia or looking at South Asia is not simply to sort of continue the binary, that there is a Western theory and now you sort of struggle to discover something that is Indian or Asian. in its some weird composition, or to sort of imagine a certain kind of a nostalgia or certain kind of a self-production imagination as against a history that has been unjust or unfair to you. But I think it's very important for us to be able to conceptualize, or to be able to sort of look and figure out where we can sort of intervene, all of us as thinkers, as practitioners, into developing a larger geographical context which has had its own networks and flows through history. So whether it was the question of looking at simply the idea of architecture, simply the idea of the built environment in the context of South Asia, or the next topic, which is going to be dwelling in the Asian city, the sense of this context is, I think, extremely important. And whether one is looking at architecture, or whether one is looking at the question of dwelling, the context is also, I think, what we are constantly trying to sort of investigate and re-look at in various structures, in various ways. I think dwelling and housing has been an important issue. In the last 1 year itself, there have been a couple of not only exhibitions, but a variety of conferences at independent institution levels, but also at a lot of academic level, a certain kind of an investment in the question of housing. And I think besides simply looking at the idea of housing as a question of architecture or as a question of infrastructure, I think it is a much broader area of investigation, whether it is the sense of the self locating itself within contexts that are contexts of comfort, contexts of being, contexts of developing, or it is the broader sense of human beings trying to locate themselves between geographies that are not always certain, or between time contexts that are not always also fixed and certain. So this question of dwelling, and I think once you look at the text also identifies a particular focus, but also a set of areas within which the essays can explore or look into themselves. And we really hope that over a period of time, these essays that get published, there is a certain sort of a collection, or there is a certain sort of a bank of thinking that emerges, which can precisely do what Krishna Priya was saying, provide a set of thinking areas, or provide a set of thinking context on which all of us can build upon. And in that sense, what better a place than CEPT, which in many ways has been at the center of certain areas of research and writing. And I think it's also necessary that we shift the way we do research, we shift the way we write, we shift the way we think about things. So forms of documentations, forms of thinking, forms of writing are really sort of necessary to explore. So as much as there have been many prizes that have looked at forms of documentation, forms of certain kinds of study, I think it's important that we have been able to establish a space for writing and thinking through writing. May I invite Arshia once again on stage, and Tridib to release the poster of this new topic, the second round that we are announcing. Thank you so much, Arshia. Thank you so much, Tridib. And I think this will really be an occasion, not only a certain kind of a shift between the first and second round, between sort of architecture and the specificity of looking at housing, but also a broader question of what is our understanding of urbanity, and in the broader geographical and historical context that we are trying to understand this. Well, with this introduction, let me move on to the next part of this evening. We've invited, as Seema mentioned, Arshia Sattar to deliver the first CEPT Essay Prize lecture, and it's wonderful and it's a great honor to have you, Arshia. Before I get into a bit of a formal introduction, which we will do as it is customary to do always, I think Arshia, for a lot of us, and I speak from very specific context, I don't know what has been the nature or the scene on this campus, but I think one of the things that all of us have known Arshia for and loved her for is her wonderful translation and retelling of the Ramayana, which goes forward as the Penguin Classic Ramayana. One thing that the Penguin Classic doesn't do is tell the contemporary translator and reteller's name on the cover. That's one of their issues with all translations. So whether it's Dom Moraes or whether it's Ay Lalla, all of them have that problem. But if you sort of open, you see that there is somebody who is translating and retelling the Ramayana. And I think that text, for a lot of us, including the kind of involvement in forms of workshops, in forms of literally retelling, whether it is Arshia or some of her students who one has been familiar with, one has worked with, I think it was extremely important for us to live with a text through the 1990s up to now. The Ramayana has been a much sort of a contested text, and it comes to us in a certain political avatar. But what does it mean to sort of go back to the literary text, to go back to a certain sense of reading literature, to go back to a certain sense of enjoying myth and mythology? And I think that is something that this one book exclusively has done for a lot of us, in especially the last 2 decades, which have otherwise sort of made us extremely sort of wary of the way we are looking at certain historical texts, especially texts that come from mythology or certain areas of religious literature. So I think it is also important for us to have Arshia here, because it also means, in a certain sense, of how do we sort of look at context, how do we look at or locate works in certain contexts that are historical as well as contemporary simultaneously, and which is why the lecture by Arshia will be followed with a conversation between Arshia and Dr. Tridib Sarud. Let me more formally introduce Arshia, who has her Ph.D. from the Department of South Asian Languages and Literatures, where she worked with A.K. Ramanujan and Wendy Doniger. Her abridged translation of the Valmiki Ramayana and the Katha Sarit Sagar, another wonderful book, have been published as Penguin Classics. She has been both a Fulbright Scholar and a Rockefeller Fellow. As visiting faculty, she has taught classical Indian literatures at various institutions in India and in the US, including Middlebury College, Hampshire College, the National Institute of Design in Ahmedabad, the Film and Television Institute of India in Pune, and the Srishti School of Art, Design and Technology in Bangalore, as well as the Azim Premji University in Bangalore. She writes on books and literature in several publications, both here and abroad, and in 2009, along with D.W. Gibson, she started the Sangam House International Residency Program for Writers. Arshia currently runs the Yali program for translations into Indian languages situated at Sangam House. With this, may I invite you, Arshia.
Good evening, and thank you for having me here. Especially thanks to Seema. We've been talking about this for 10 years, me coming to CEPT. And a very, very big thank you to Kaiwan, who takes me to most interesting and unlikely places to talk about Ramayana. I'm absolutely delighted to be here at the inception of the CEPT Essay Prize. It's a great honor to give the first lecture. And I want to say that I love prizes, not personally necessarily, but I think a prize is a very good idea. And I think also what is remarkable about this prize is that it has a goodly sum of award money. And that is not because everything is about money. It's not because this is becoming an increasingly monetized world, that culture is understood only in terms of what it can give you, but what it does is it gives a young person a chance to take time off, a chance to say, okay, I have this much money, I don't need to work for the next 3 months, I can write another book, I can write another essay. Of course, I am more than happy that the first winner is a young woman. But also, so this is why I love prizes. Sometimes they give you lots of money, but mainly they recognize something in you that perhaps you did not recognize in yourself. It is, it's an acknowledgement of the secret self. Yeah, that the world knows now that Krishna Priya is a writer. But what it also does is it places a sense of responsibility on Krishna Priya. She has to respect the award, she has to honor the award, she has to remember that everybody in this room and possibly further out in the world as well now thinks she's a writer. So she has to live up to that promise. No pressure, of course, none whatsoever. So very good wishes to you, and of course I hope you keep writing. Okay, I am going to talk now. Since this is CEPT, I'm going to talk about Ramayana, which I always talk about, but I'm going to talk about cities in the Ramayana. A story that typically in our minds is dominated by the idea of exile, of living outside the city. Everything that happens to Rama really does happen to him when he is in exile. So we know that Rama spent 14 years in exile, banished from Ayodhya by his whimsical stepmother, who wished her own son to be king. The promise Rama made to Kaikeyi was not simply that he would live in the forest as an ascetic for 14 years, but that he would not enter any city for that entire period. At first, he settles in Nandigram, but then he moves deeper and deeper into the Dandaka forest with his wife Sita and his brother Lakshmana, well past the settlements of the sages in Panchavati and Janasthana. In Dandaka, his wife is stolen away from him, and even after he makes an alliance with the monkey Sugriva, Rama remains outside the city of Kishkindha, preferring to live in the caves that dot the hillsides around Pampa Sarovara. In the final months of his exile, Rama lays siege to Lanka, the Rakshasa's magnificent city, until the final battle when Ravana is killed. And then, after 14 long years, filled with trials and tribulations, Rama returns in triumph to Ayodhya, taking back the kingship and the kingdom that were always rightfully his. So there are 3 cities in the Ramayana: Ayodhya, Kishkindha, and Lanka, each belonging to a different kind of being. Ayodhya for the humans, Kishkindha for the monkeys, and Lanka for the Rakshasas. Each city has its own dharma, a code of behavior that it imposes on its citizens. And given that there are 3 kinds of beings in the Ramayana, the humans, the monkeys, and the Rakshasa, there are also 3 kinds of way to be. Further, there are effectively 3 worlds in the Ramayana, each located in and defined by a city. Each of the cities reflects the nature of the beings that inhabit it. Each of the cities embodies the characteristics of its peoples. By depicting each of the cities as having a unique milieu, the Ramayana also explores multiple dharmas, or ways of being in the world. Kishkindha, the city of the monkeys, and Lanka, the city of the Rakshasas, are set in contrast to Ayodhya, just as monkey and Rakshasa dharmas are contrasted with human codes of behavior and the ethics lived out by Rama and his brothers. There is, of course, a 4th world in the story, the liminal world of the forest, where different creatures and different ways of being collide, where the way one lives and which dharma one follows appears to be a matter of choice. In the cities, however, ways of being and doing are determined and unalterable. I will extend the city and dharma argument a little further and suggest that the dharma a city sanctions is visited most especially upon its women, that women are expected to embody the dharma of their city. As such, the violation of the city's dharma involves transgressions perpetrated on women. The descriptions of Ayodhya, the city inhabited by humans, are relatively minimal. it being defined more by references to the nature of its people and the order that prevails in it rather than by its physical buildings. The most important thing about Ayodhya is the maintenance of order, which includes that the four castes behave as they should. The maintenance of order is consequent upon the righteousness of its rulers and their upholding of dharma. So I'm going to read a little bit from my translation. It's how Ayodhya is described. Always associated with truth, King Dasharatha supported the three upper castes and ruled his city the way Indra ruled Amravati. The people who lived in Dasharatha's city were happy, learned, and virtuous. There was no greed, for each was satisfied with what he had and spoke the truth. No one was poor in Ayodhya. People lived happily with their cows, horses, and families, and with what wealth they had. Nowhere in Ayodhya would you see a man who was lustful, cruel, or miserly. No one who was illiterate or an atheist. Men and women were righteous, disciplined, and happy. They resembled the great sages in their conduct and behavior. Everyone adorned themselves with earrings, coronets, and necklaces. They bathed every day and anointed themselves with sweet-smelling unguents. No one ate impure food, nor did they let their neighbors go hungry. Just as no one was unadorned, so too there was no one with a distracted mind. Even though Ayodhya had thousands of Brahmins, people did not neglect the performance of household sacrifices and rituals. Brahmins were committed to the performance of public rituals and were allowed to accept gifts. They were learned and they had conquered their senses because of their exalted characters. There were no unbelievers, nor were there any ignorant or unrighteous people in Ayodhya. There were no libertines either. There was no sadness or poverty. Men and women were beautiful and wealthy, and they were all devoted to their king. A guest was honored as a god in the homes of all four castes. People took refuge in the truth and lived well into old age. The Kshatriyas placed the Brahmins first, and the Vaishyas followed the Kshatriyas, and the Shudras, according to their duty, served the other three castes. What we see of the city itself, physically, is sort of by the way. When the citizens of Ayodhya learn about Rama's coronation, of course they're very happy, and I quote, "The joyous citizens began to decorate the city. Banners and buntings danced in the breeze from the temple spires that gleamed like white clouds, from the homes and terraces of rich and prominent citizens, from roads and city squares, from private homes and public buildings. Even the tallest trees were decorated with brightly colored flags. Flowers were scattered in the streets, sweet incense filled the air, and wooden torches as large as trees lined the streets." At other moments, as we follow Rama from palace to palace, when he first hears about and then conveys the news of his banishment, we see the city as a backdrop. And Rama looked upon his prosperous city, its squares and highways crowded with horses and elephants and chariots, and its people who displayed their abundant wealth, lined with shops displaying goods for sale, and he felt proud and happy. So while there is wealth and prosperity in Ayodhya, there is also an atmosphere of restraint and virtue, of whiteness and purity, of gleaming spires and orderly squares and streets. The only chaos we experience in Ayodhya is when Rama, Sita, and Lakshmana depart for the forest. As Rama drove out of Ayodhya for his long stay in the forest, the city was filled with the sounds of horses' trappings, jinglings, of elephants trumpeting, of agitated people. The sounds swelled and reverberated in the entire city. Old and young ran behind Rama's chariot as they would run towards water in the parched months of the summer. As an example of the character of the city and the behavior of its people, in Ayodhya, the issue of disputed kingship, obviously between Rama and Bharata, is resolved with grace and delicacy. Rama does not contest his father's decree that he be banished into the forest for 14 years. His brother Bharata, who inherits the throne as a corollary to Rama's exile, is ashamed of his mother's machinations, and he tries to persuade Rama to take back the kingship which is rightfully his. Bharata comes to meet Rama in Nandigram, where Rama has decided to live, and he says, thank you. And Bharata says to Rama, "What will I do with this advice on the duties of a king when I have renounced kingship?" And Bharata goes on, "The eternally established dharma states that while an older son lives, a younger son cannot be king. Come back with me to prosperous Ayodhya and crown yourself king for the glory of our clan." Rama refuses the throne and promises to reclaim his inheritance after he has lived for 14 years in the forest. The monkeys seem to live a more emotionally charged life in their city of Kishkindha than do the citizens of Ayodhya. As Sugriva, the exiled monkey king, tells Rama the story of his plight, he refers not only to his brother Vali's power and strength, but also to Vali's love of sensuality and drink, of how Vali has claimed Sugriva's wife Ruma even as he reclaimed the kingdom. After Vali's death, Rama cannot enter the city of Kishkindha because of the terms of his exile. But Lakshmana enters the city to remind Sugriva, who has succumbed to the same love of luxury and pleasure as his brother. And this is one of my most favorite descriptions in the whole of the Ramayana. So Lakshmana enters Kishkindha. He looked around the city nestling in the valley with its jewel-studded building and flower-filled gardens. Full of elegant mansions and shops, Kishkindha overflowed with trees that flowered and fruited all through the year. The monkey citizens were all children of the gods and Gandharvas, and they could change their forms at will. They were beautiful to behold in their fine clothes and celestial garlands. Kishkindha's roads were perfumed with flowers and sandal paste, and the fragrance of natural liquors like mead and toddy wafted through the air. Lakshmana saw the homes of the great monkey chiefs and the wide thoroughfares that gleamed like white clouds. They were decorated with celestial flowers, filled with wealth and grain, and adorned by women who shone like jewels. The king's palace rivaled Indra's. It was surrounded by sparkling white walls that were hard to breach. It had several white towers that were like the peaks of Mount Kailasha. Its garden had trees gifted by Indra that gave any kind of fruit you could wish for. They were covered with flowers and provided generous, soothing shade. Mighty Lakshmana entered Sugriva's palace uninvited, as the sun enters a huge cloud. He passed through 7 courtyards before he came to the heavily guarded inner apartments that were filled with couches of gold and silver and seats that were covered with rich and beautiful brocades. Lakshmana could hear soft and melodious music when he walked in, and he saw scores of women, all of them reveling in their youth and beauty. They sat there, adorned with rare flowers and exquisite jewels, weaving garlands. Lakshmana could not see a single retainer who was lazy, discontented, or not fully adorned. Excuse me. For all that Ayodhya is a city of restraint, Kishkindha seems to be a city of pleasure. The monkeys are honorable, but they're also good-looking hedonists who love silks and brocades and jewels and fine liquors. There is a lushness that hangs over Kishkindha and defines the actions of its citizens. The dharma of the monkeys permits the transfer of wives between brothers, and monkey women appear to have freedoms that human women do not. While Tara and Ruma are Sugriva's wives, Tara is also a wise counselor who advises her first husband Vali and does the same for Sugriva when he takes her as a wife after Vali's death. The situation in Kishkindha presents us with an inverted mirror of what has happened in Ayodhya. Again, there are 2 brothers, one of whom is in exile, and there is only one throne. The Kishkindha dispute is resolved more aggressively when the younger brother, Sugriva, has his elder brother, Vali, killed. The graces of Ayodhya have been replaced with violence, with a more visceral solution that is in keeping with the more heightened emotions that motivate the citizens of Kishkindha, whether it is Vali and his anger or Sugriva and his fear. Even Rama has one of his few explosions of rage in the Kishkindha region when he believes that Sugriva has forgotten the terms of their alliance. But the Ramayana reserves its best for last with regard to the cities that it describes. It is never more lyrical, never more astonishing in its visual imagery than when it describes Lanka, the island city of Ravana, where virtuous Sita has been imprisoned. Even Hanuman, citizen of Kishkindha, where liquor flows and there are silks and jewels everywhere, is astounded by what he sees in Ravana's city. He's so seduced by its beauty that he almost forgets why he is there. Hanuman gazed in wonder at the city of Lanka, which seemed like the city of the gods. It had beautiful gateways and ramparts with climbing vines carved on them that surrounded hundreds of mansions festooned with flags and banners. Situated on top of a mountain, the city with its dazzling white buildings looked like it was hanging in the air. Hanuman reached the northern gates and saw the city spread before him like a woman, the walls and ramparts her body, the vast ocean her clothes, the fortifications her hair, and the upper stories of the mansions her earrings. Lanka was as fine and lofty as the peaks of Kailasha and seemed to touch the sky. What Hanuman sees when he enters the city is even more wondrous. His experience of Lanka is at night, not in darkness, but bathed in a seductive and sympathetic moonlight. When night fell, he rose and entered the magnificent city, which was divided into quarters by huge, wide roads. Its multi-storied mansions had floors of crystal set in gold, and the mansions themselves were studded with pearls and gems. Hanuman entered the city filled with lofty mansions that were like autumn clouds. He climbed onto Lanka's ramparts, which were made of precious metals, and stared in astonishment at golden gates adorned with pearls and lapis and diamonds, decorated with gold and silver. And when he enters Ravana's palace, there were thousands of golden vehicles and heavily carved palanquins that shone like the sun. There were vine-covered arbors, opulent rooms, picture galleries, recreation areas with hills fashioned out of wood, pleasant sitting rooms and lavish bedrooms. The palace shone like the sun because of its jewels and because of Ravana's own splendor. Flowing with honey and all kinds of liquor in jeweled vessels, it was like the palace of the god of wealth. The opulence and excess of Lanka are mentioned over and over again, each image of sensuality and decadence outdoing the ones before. And once again, as with Kishkindha, the essence of the city is located in the description of its women. Hanuman saw exquisite women who appeared to be high-minded, virtuous, and pure. They shone like stars, absorbed in their lovers and their drinking. He saw other women who were illuminated by their own beauty, but they were shy and hid in their lovers' arms like birds clinging to their mates, enjoying a night of bliss. He saw women with smooth complexions, bare-breasted, with skin the color of molten gold, others with skin like moonlight. Everywhere he looked, Hanuman saw rows upon rows of moon-bright faces, eyes with long curling lashes, and ornaments that glittered like lightning. And then when he goes further into Ravana's harem, the Antapura, he sees that there were women from the families of royal sages, Daityas, Gandharvas, and Rakshasas, and they had all come to Ravana out of love. None had been carried away against her will. They had all been won over by Ravana's personality. None had ever loved another or been the wife of another. None except Sita, the daughter of Janaka. Each of Ravana's wives was nobly born, beautiful, skilled in the arts of pleasure, and extremely desirable. And the monkey, who had only worthy thoughts, said to himself, "How lucky Rama would be if his wife were like the wives of this Rakshasa king." And then he grew agitated and reminded himself that Sita was far better than these other women and that the king of Lanka had done a terrible and ignoble thing. Surely Lanka is Ayodhya turned around. Fortified strength has become proud decoration. Prosperity and wealth have become sensual beauty and showy ostentation. Virtue has turned to passion. Chastity and restraint into promiscuity and indulgence. These same qualities are displayed in the way Lanka's kingship is sorted out. Once again, Rama is the instrument by which a younger brother acquires a throne. Vibhishana, the younger brother of Ravana, believes that Ravana is an unrighteous ruler, and so he leaves his brother and plots with Rama about how best to conquer Lanka and overcome the might of the Rakshasas. His actions are duplicitous, reflecting the secrecy and shadows of the night. Ravana's enormous arrogance will not allow him to return Sita, nor will it let him admit to any mistakes that he might have made. Vibhishana does not fit in this atmosphere charged with excess and immoderation, a spectacular and uncaring decadence that can only be hurtling toward its own doom. Hanuman's first vision of Lanka was as a woman, and it is noteworthy that there are no physical descriptions of Ayodhya's women similar to those for the women of Kishkindha and Lanka. And while we have some sense of what individual women in Ayodhya, Sita, Kaikeyi, Manthara, Kaushalya, are like, there are no descriptions of Ayodhya's women as a group. We are told that Manthara is a hunchback, but the royal women of Ayodhya are never described in terms of their physical attributes. The way women are portrayed is contiguous with the city and the culture or the dharma that each of the cities supports. The conservative nature of human relations in Ayodhya is amplified by the fact that the city's women are not described in terms of their bodies or in relation to men. Ayodhya's women are chaste and submissive and stay well within their conjugal boundaries, which makes Manthara's conniving and Kaikeyi's petulant greed all the more remarkable. In Kishkindha, where monkey dharma allows shared sexual partners, women are described in some detail. And finally, in Lanka, where Rakshasa dharma allows multiple partners, the women are lavishly and lovingly described in all their sensual glory. Just as human, monkey, and Rakshasa women have different boundaries in terms of whom they can sleep with, so too cities define the possible relations within themselves and offer different solutions to the problems of disputed kingship. It is as if the city is the boundary within which societies can flourish in their unique coherence and with a single dharma in operation, whether it is human society in Ayodhya, monkey society in Kishkindha, or Rakshasa society in Lanka. It is through these descriptions of the cities and the women that inhabit them that we see how clearly dharma, its maintenance as well as its violation, centers around women. How dharma hovers on the edge of conjugal behavior and marital transgression. While cities can only accommodate one dharma at a time, the forest becomes a space where multiple dharmas can and do exist simultaneously for women as well. We know that the sages' wives inhabit the forest with their firm adherence to the rules of regulation of marriage and hermitage living. But the forest is also the habitat of Shurpanakha, sister to Ravana, single and promiscuous. When Shurpanakha approaches Rama and Lakshmana in the Dandaka, she says, "I am the Rakshasi Shurpanakha, and I can change my form at will. I do as I please. I wander through this forest by myself, and I strike terror into the hearts of all creatures." She describes her Rakshasa brothers and ends her introduction with a boast about her freedom as a single woman, saying of her brothers, "None of them have any control over me." As a Rakshasi, Shurpanakha has the right to proposition men that she finds attractive, which she does when she sees Rama and Lakshmana. To the princes, however, this free woman embodies the qualities of the forest itself: wild, unknown, untamable, and eventually threatening. The rules of Ayodhya, the only rules that the princes know, make this single and sexually active woman dangerous. In a terrible miscalculation with far-reaching and devastating consequences, the princes mutilate the Rakshasi, applying the principles of Ayodhya Dharma in a place where it is inappropriate. In direct contrast to Shurpanakha and all that her presence in the forest implies, there is also the mysterious Swayamprabha, the self-illuminated ascetic who lives in an enchanted cave into which the monkeys stumble as they search for Sita. With the power accumulated through her practice of austerities, Swayamprabha saves the monkey troops and transports them directly to the shores of the ocean. The forest, therefore, supports the sexual aggression and indulgence of Shurpanakha as well as the fierce celibacy of Swayamprabha. Thus, the forest, or rather any space outside the city, is an indeterminate space where multiple dharmas can coexist. It is established as a place of fluidity, where shapes can change and where unusual and challenging choices become available. Many scholars have pointed to the fact that in literatures across the world, spaces outside the city are seen as liminal zones, spaces where transgressions can occur without retribution. The rules of the city do not apply. Characters come up against the unexpected, the magical, and the dangerous. And I would like to extend this insight further and suggest that when transgressive behaviors or acts, which might have been allowed in the forest or the wilderness, when such transgressive behaviors are committed within the city, they lead to disaster. A determined way of life is threatened and quite often shaken. Transgressive behaviors have to be contained or uprooted in order that order be maintained. In the case of the Ramayana, transgressions within the city are catastrophic. The severity of the violations is determined by the nature of dharma in each particular city, but each of the violations involves a woman. Dasharatha's surrender to Kaikeyi's demands. Am I going on too long? No? Okay. Dasharatha's surrender to Kaikeyi's demands goes against the dharma established in Ayodhya, where, apart from the established tradition of primogeniture, the norms of behavior are about restraint and the public good. Vali's addition of Rama to his harem within the walls of Kishkindha while Sugriva is still alive violates the dharma of Kishkindha, which is otherwise rather more permissive with regard to multiple women and wives. Ravana brings Sita to Lanka by force, whereas all the other hundreds of women in his palace have come to him out of their own choice. Any of these actions, from Dasharatha or Vali or Ravana, might have been permissible in the space outside the city, but because they occur within the city, they become transgressive and lead to catastrophe. For Rama and Sita, it is the return to Ayodhya and its stringent dharma with regard to women that leads to the tragedy that lies at the heart of the Ramayana, which is the final separation between Rama and Sita. Once he is back in Ayodhya, with its restrictive moralities and codes of conduct, Rama assumes the role of a king and banishes his pregnant wife into the forest because his people question her chastity. It is as if the Agni Pariksha that proves Sita's innocence on the battlefield in front of the monkeys and Rakshasas was not sufficient proof for the people of Ayodhya. In the places where dharmas other than human dharma upheld by Ayodhya prevails, Sita could be considered chaste after the Agni Pariksha that she asked for. But Ayodhya cannot accept this proof of the trial by fire, even though it was a trial blessed by the gods. It appears that Ayodhya cannot even countenance the possibility that an abducted woman might have remained unmolested. Rama sacrifices his personal happiness for the sake of Ayodhya's dharma, sending his beloved wife away from the city that will not take her back. When Sita does return to Ayodhya, summoned by Valmiki to Rama's great sacrifice, where the story of his life is being recited, Rama has already been reunited with his sons. When Sita is asked to prove her chastity once more in the presence of Ayodhya's citizen, this time it is Sita who goes away, rejecting both her husband and the city that has bound him within its moral strictures. Sita leaves Rama, Ayodhya, and her sons behind as she disappears into the earth, never to return. Her presence in Ayodhya has become irrelevant, for with Rama's sons having been publicly pronounced as legitimate by Valmiki at the sacrifice, Ayodhya's future is secure. The mores of the same city, Ayodhya, demand that Rama kill the Shudra Shambhuka, who is practicing austerities meant only for the upper castes. If Ayodhya is to remain perfect, its castes must remain within their boundaries. Of course, we must take note of the fact that the turbulence caused in Ayodhya because of Shambhuka's tapasya, because of his great austerities, is that the son of a Brahmin dies. That's why it becomes a problem. As described earlier, Ayodhya's prosperity is predicated on caste order, hierarchy, and the upholding of caste dharmas as much as it is predicated on the righteousness of its king. It becomes Rama's duty as a good king to kill the Shudra who is acting above his station. But I'd like to return for a minute to the idea that the forest, the liminal space, is the locus of many dharmas. It is a place where one can decide how to behave, and in that sense, one can decide who to be. Rama and Lakshmana both carry this ambiguity of who they are upon their bodies. As many forest dwellers, including Shurpanakha, remark, they have the matted hair of the ascetic, but they carry the weapons of a warrior. With these mixed signals, they confuse the creatures that they meet, but they also embody the idea of liminality, the potential for being both this and that at the same time. Also, they carry the potential for choosing to be this at one time and that at another time. There is a wonderful and quite unexpected moment in the Aranyakanda when Sita talks to Rama about violence. She says, "Now that you are here with your brother and both of you are armed, you shall see many forest creatures. Inevitably, you will be tempted to use your arrows. Like dry fuel bursts into flame when it is near a fire, so too a Kshatriya's passions are ignited when he has a bow at hand. A Kshatriya should use his bow in the forest only to protect the oppressed. What a difference there is between the life of weapons and that of the forest, between the vows of a Kshatriya and those of an ascetic. We must learn to respect the code of behavior of the world we now inhabit. Here, the mind is perverted by extreme proximity to weapons. You can return to the code of the Kshatriyas, Rama, when we go back to Ayodhya." Rama and Lakshmana have chosen to continue living as warriors in the forest, despite the fact that on 2 previous occasions, after the news of his banishment, Rama himself has rejected the dharma of a Kshatriya as being vile and base. Perhaps that was in preparation for his time away from the city. But if it was, it is clear that Rama has either forgotten to modify his actions or decided that it's not as important to do so as he had once thought it might be. Sita's gentle nudge about behavior appropriate to the space in which one finds oneself and the violence that necessarily accompanies weapons, however, goes unheeded. Rama judges Shurpanakha's flirtation by a code that is his and not hers, and the consequences of that error of judgment are dire. It is in the spaces outside the city of Ayodhya, where human dharma does not apply, that Rama acts in ways that continue to trouble us. It is in the forest that he encourages his brother to attack Shurpanakha, and it is outside the city that he kills Vali. It would appear that Rama has disregarded Sita's caution about adopting the Kshatriya code when he is outside Ayodhya, the place where his behavior as well as his destiny are fully determined. Ironically, it is the dharma of a Kshatriya that Rama violates when he kills Vali. He shoots him from a hiding place. He shoots him from behind. He shoots him while he is engaged in combat with another. But what makes many of us most uncomfortable is what Rama does when he returns to Ayodhya. He banishes Sita because his people, the citizens, are gossiping about her, and he kills Shambhuka. In both cases, however, he is upholding the dharma of his city and not transgressing it. In the city, it is Raja Dharma that determines Rama's actions rather than any personal desire or ideas of justice. How then do we react to the behaviors and codes of conduct that our cities impose on us? Should young women stay within so-called safe spaces because our cities, particularly after dark, do not welcome them? Should young men continue to act with impunity on the streets simply because they can, because the city allows them these freedoms? Do we let the city tell us what we can do and cannot do? Or do we challenge the city that excludes us on the basis of gender, caste, religion, politics, language, income, occupation, sexuality, or any of our other identities, be they given identities or chosen ones? The Indian cities that I grew up in, and there were many, I lived in many places, nurtured many ways of being, allowed many dharmas, as it were, to flourish. Now we are faced with situations where building societies exclude people because of what they eat. We are seeing the great growth of caste-specific residential enclaves. What will be the future of a city that willfully marginalizes vast numbers of its own people? What will be the future of a nation that mindfully disenfranchises the castes and communities it holds within itself? The stories from our past suggest that dharma should be fluid, flexible, nuanced, that it should respond to time and place and person, that it should always be context sensitive, as A.K. Ramanujan said. It is when our ideas of dharma become rigid that we make our worst mistakes, mistakes that devastate our lives as individuals and eventually devastate us as societies. If we are going to look to the past to determine our future, let us remember that the sum of the stories we love best are cautionary as much as they are inspirational. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening.
Absolutely delighted. Her teacher, A.K. Ramanujan, used to say, everyone in India knows the story of Mahabharata and the Ramayana precisely because we don't read it. We've read parts of it. It's been told to us in many ways. But that there's merit to reading. And then this is what you get when there is an engagement with the text which lasts over a lifetime. Arshia in some ways represents a very rare kind of a scholar who does not have any need, a compulsive need to move from a text to a text, an idea to another idea, because here is this text so vast, so complex, and so contemporary that it can actually contain all our questions, all our quarrels with ourselves, with our future, as also our past. So, and I think, that's something which is very rare, Arshia, very important. Second, I think, is that there is also a way of being a scholastic which involves a process of translation of text. This is an older, more gentler, very hardworking, back-breaking scholarship which says when you engage with a text, you translate it. It's only when you read and reread each word, meditate upon it, each comma, that you begin to open up a text. And your reading of a text, your scholastic work on a text, must always begin with an act of translation. which happens rarely now. There are very few people left who see act of translation as an act of scholarship. So thank you for doing both for us. I'm going to open it up to people, but before I do that, let me take you back to your earlier work, which is really, she's the best expert on Hanuman. Her work was on Hanuman, and our relationship with Hanuman has changed over the decades. This city's relationship with Hanuman has changed. I'll give you an example of something that happens to the city right? Every time, periodically this city likes to turn against itself. And then there is what is called a riot. Every time there is a riot, there is destruction of various places of worship. Hindu, Muslim, but certainly all those things which are on roadside. Because when you remove a roadside shrine, it allows for development. It's very good. I mean, if a riot can take away a little temple here and a little shrine there, and every time a Muslim shrine would be taken away, Hanuman is placed there, and very, very importantly, it's marked as Hulladiya Hanuman. It's a Hanuman which came about through an act of rioting to distinguish it from a properly consecrated Hanuman. So our relationship to divinity, semi-divine beings in cities undergoes a process of transformation. So do you want to reflect on what we've been, how our relationship with this, the most amazing of divine beings or semi-divine beings, which is Hanuman, has been in the last, let's say, 30, 40 years, or maybe a century?
I find it astounding that Hanuman has become the leader of various aggressions. He is so sweet, he's so kind, he's so gentle, he's so funny, he's so generous, he can fly, he can speak whatever language you are speaking. How could this person become Hulladiya? Yeah? Some of it, I imagine, and more people are starting to talk about this now, that what happened to Hinduism in the north under, those various centuries of Islamic rule, and it's not because the Muslims were terrible, it just was a religion that was not the state religion. And so it reconstituted itself in many ways, and a new set of heroes were born. And one kind of hero was a masculinized Hanuman, big muscles, and he was the patron deity of the akhadas, and all the Pehlwans, the wrestlers loved him. But the other god that was developing at the same time was this beautiful, romantic, sweet prince in disguise, Krishna. Yeah, so, and some people say a very feminized God. So on the one hand, we have Krishna developing in a completely non-threatening way, and in another way, we have Hanuman developing in a potentially threatening way. And it's when Rama when L.K. Advani did his Rath Yatra, in the lead up to the Rath Yatra, when suddenly, again, Rama and Sita and Lakshmana are always portrayed as domesticated. Vishnu is not the great warrior god. Vishnu is always reclining. Lakshmi sits next to him. But just before Advani's Yatra, suddenly Rama becomes a warrior. Right? He's standing on a chariot. His hair is blowing back in the wind. He's blue. He's got his bow and arrow at the ready. And when Rama becomes a warrior, Hanuman has to become his warrior companion. And of course, one can never, and one should never say that somebody else's religious interpretation is inaccurate or incorrect. So these are real and true ways to think about God. And that is scary, that God is vengeful, God unleashes anger, God unleashes violence. Those are really scary things. So
those are scary gods. And I think, last year or year before, we saw the first set of translations, very large set of translations of the Tulsi Ramayana, with the and very beautifully translated in verse. And so do you see that this relationship that we've had with text, a large epical text, has begun to alter? Or, for there was a long period where, with the exception of maybe 3 or 4 people, we didn't really engage with reading of a text. We dispensed with reading. And we started, most people started writing essays based on a line in a book, the kind of fancy things that Kaivan did for his Ph.D. Even if you didn't, it happened today, right? So, but I think there's something very, very nice in the way things are opening up.
Yeah, there's, of course, one of the reasons that we have such a difficult relationship with texts is because, we fetishize this fact that we're from an oral culture. The idea of memorizing text and all, I can recite whole Veda, oh, very good. I can recite whole Quran, oh, very good for you also. But nobody reads, yeah? When I translated Ramayana and it was out in the market, a big fat book and all, right? And all my friends, so sweet, all bought it, everybody. It's prominently displayed in their living rooms, but they've never opened it, right? You can tell. And I say, hey guy, you haven't read my book. Like, why should I read it? So why should you not read? I know the story. And I'm like, actually, you don't know the story. You especially don't know Valmiki's story. So we don't read any kind of Ramayana because we think we know it. These beautiful, beautiful new translations that are coming out, I think they're going to be for people like you and me, really, because what people are reading now is Amish and Anand Neelakantan and, Anuja Chandramouli and various other people. Now, those people are reshaping Hinduism. It's Hinduism for the 21st century. And, like Amish's Sita and all these Sitas, even Ashok Banker, she's like Xena, warrior princess. She's a great warrior. She's his companion. It's like, oh, does your imagination, Mr. Man, just like shrink? Yeah, the only way you can imagine a different kind of woman is to masculinize her and to make her a warrior. It's like, why? Why can't she be cool without being a warrior?
Wear leather thongs.
Exactly, fully leather thongs. Amazon, this, that, yeah. So, but the other thing also is that, Amish and all like that, I'm constantly on panels with them at various literature festivals. I've actually stopped going to...
Why?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. I've actually stopped going to literature festivals. I don't want to...
traveling service.
We should. Devadatta and all ko ghar mein chodo, And they're always like, oh, I'm revolutionizing Hinduism. And I was like, really? Well, here's the thing, that they claim to be subversive. They claim to be making Hinduism new and relevant. But if you don't read the original text, how do I know what the subversion is? I'm just taking it, Arey, Sita to aise hi thi, Sita Maiya to warrior hi thi. Nahi thi, Amish ne kiya, 2 saal hue, So it's a very, very fraught time, Like people say, oh, Chetan Bhagat has brought reading back to India. And I'm like, no! That's not called reading. That's called something else. That's called consuming. There's a appetitive sort of relationship with that. So I don't know what is going to happen to these beautiful translations. What I do think is important is that they exist. Somebody someday will read them. And also that we must keep translating. My Ramayana is 20 years old. There should be another one now, because mera time aake gaya, that whoever that gully boy guy, apun ka time aayega, somebody else has to say that. I've had my 20 years of glory with this text, so it's really should pass to someone else.
We'll go on, but you clearly have things that you wish to share, or my mic can travel, yours should stay.
Hi, my name is Ami. I'm really caught on by this idea of the forest as a liminal space. We've heard it before, but something about the way you narrated it today. And I can imagine a Surupanika, or I can imagine lovers. But more than that, I find it incredible that, I don't know much about it, but I find it incredible that Gurukuls, which teach you about which are supposed to educate young people about the dharma of the place they will live in, find themselves in the forest. And could you talk a little bit about the space of such an educational institution? You know what I'm trying to suggest, that it positions itself outside the city, and the dharma that it is trying to teach in a way.
Well, first of all, the ashrama, the stage of life of brahmacharya when you're a student, is a state of preparation. You're not really doing anything, right? You're just learning. Also, gurukuls were not situated in the deep forest, right, which is a truly liminal space. But that deep forest is complicated by the fact that somebody who embodies the kinds of freedoms that Shurpanakha embodies can live in the same forest as sages and their wives, who practice restraint and who meditate and, who think not about the life they're living, but the next life, right? What is going to happen. The other thing that I find absolutely fascinating is whether it's the Buddha, or it's Yudhishthira, or it's Rama, right? All these men who have problems being king go into the forest, right? It's as if being in the forest allows them to see the dharma that they were practicing from a distance, with a certain objectivity, with a certain perspective. And then they can think about whether they want to replay that dharma, to modify it in some way. The Buddha rejects it all and goes away. Yudhishthira, poor thing, comes back and is the worst possible king that anybody's ever had. Rama comes back and becomes the best possible king, but he practices a dharma that is so harsh, not only to the people around him, but to himself as well. Yeah? So in general, this idea, and I've taught at schools that, oh, no, we must be in the country, students will study better in the country because they've got nothing to do, they will learn about nature, nothing. Students are the same everywhere. They find everything that will distract them from their studies. You don't have to be living in a city to be distracted, But what the school outside the city does do is that it fosters a particular kind of bond between teachers and students, because there really is nobody else there. Yeah, you got to play with each other. You got to get along. Yeah, and that I think is a good thing. I think it's good for students to be with people that are older than them, but I think it's very, very important for teachers to be with people who are younger than them. Yeah, so I don't think it's about the environment quite so much as it's about the isolation. Yeah, sorry, that was a very long and complicated answer.
Also, I think what she meant was there is a space called aranya which is different from what you call the forest, and therefore you have this entire set of writings which are called the aranyakas, which arise in that space between the city and the deep forest, which is where the training or the discourse of dharma is actually taught to you. Right? So the Upanishadic tales are all about the aranya, which is not the forest. So you need to make the distinction, because we think of both these spaces as forest. They're not. One is the aranya, the other is the forest.
Dandaka is the scary place. Dandaka is the forest, yeah. Isn't it amazing that we're in our current nation, that the place where we have the Maoist insurgency, that area is officially called Dandaka. And it's like, oh, God has a sense of humor, really, to place this insurgency there.
In comparing these three cities, both Kishkindha and Lanka, it looks as if there is no dharma. In a sense, it's the most liminal of space. Almost anything and everything goes, as against where only one thing can go in Ayodhya. So it's actually the forest inside the city. I was just, from the descriptions that you were narrating, it looked as if it's more than having three distinct dharmas. It looked like one having and the two not having anything. Am I right in reading it like that?
No, I actually think there is a dharma in Kishkindha, and there is yet another dharma in Lanka. And most of it, as I said, is about women. In Kishkindha, you can take your brother's wife. It's okay. Women are allowed to be traded between men. But then in Lanka, women are allowed to choose their own lovers. That's why so many of them come to Ravana, for example. So these are different ways of being, literally. So, and that's why the question of violation and transgression becomes so vexed, because Ravana taking Sita is actually, he's completely living out his Rakshasa dharma. Shurpanakha saying to Rama, I want to sleep with you, is living out her Rakshasa dharma. It only seems adharmic from a human point of view. And if Ravana is fulfilling his Rakshasa dharma by stealing other people's wives and going to war and, drinking and all like that, the question, and that is contrasted with Vibhishana's behavior, who doesn't want to do any of this, who reads the Vedas and who joins Rama. Which one is the good Rakshasa? The guy who follows Rakshasa dharma, which is Ravana, fully? Or is it Vibhishana? He can't be, because he rejects the dharma into which he was born. Right? So, and Mahabharata tells us dharma is sukshma. It is impossible. It is elusive. We're never going to get a hold of it. We just have to constantly be aware of why we are choosing what we're choosing. At least, after so many years of being with dharma, I'm thinking okay, this is all I can expect from myself. I live with some conscious, even when I lapse, I must be aware, why I am lapsing. All lapses are not equal.
So, ma'am, dharma is very subtle, right? As Yudhishthira says. No, it's okay. To that question, when Draupadi asked, when was the time? When he pawns her, no? So she asked that question, and Bhishma says that dharma is very subtle. But I've come to read that abduction means keeping the brother's wife. In Sugriva's case, in Bali's case, he has made Tara, Sugriva's wife, as his wife. That was, that dharma is violated there. So what would you say to this? Even though they are monkeys.
Yeah, and that's what Rama says to Vali, I'm killing you because you took your brother's wife.
That was considered.
And Vali is like, I'm a monkey. Yeah, this is not my dharma. You guys do it differently. Where I come from, this is allowed. Right? So that is why, this talk today is part of a much longer thing that I'm in the process of writing. But the problems occur when Rama imposes the rules of human dharma on people or creatures who have a different set of rules, right? And that, I think, is very relevant for us, especially now, when we're asking all people to behave in one particular way, whether or not it is appropriate for them, or even natural to them. That there must be only heterosexual relationships, there can be only heterosexual marriage, you can't eat beef, you can't marry this one, whatever it is, no? There have to be different ways to live in the world.
So dharma remains elusive, largely.
Yeah, thank God. Really, thank God. Because if it is not elusive, we will stop thinking. And then we will stop being independent moral entities. No, we will just be following rules that other people set for us. And that, to me, is a very, very bad thing.
And one more question, ma'am. It is in the original text. How is it, ma'am? These women who were in Ravana's harem, they came on their volition, or it is that Ravana actually abducted because he was a man of his own fancy.
Well, the text says that they came on their own.
Their own.
Yeah, and when you read descriptions of Ravana, it's I would go
because he is used to having his, yeah.
He's very, very attractive. He's very powerful. He's very charismatic. And why would he, he's willing to have you. You live in a nice place. You have lots of lady friends to play with. Food is great. So I can imagine, the seduction of being in Ravana's harem. But he Sita is the one he kidnapped. And of course, earlier, we find out in other stories that he had raped Rambha, that he had violated Vedavati, and that's why he gets all these curses. So yeah, because everybody wonders about how can so many women have come to Ravana just like that on their own? And then the Ramayana tells backstories later to complete or to round off the characters that it's already given us. So,
if there are no more questions, any more questions? Maybe I can sort of just ask the one of the last few ones. Thank you. It was fascinating. I mean, it was magical. Just listening to you was like listening to an oral rendition, and you hear, I mean, you don't hear this very often these days. So thank you so much for that wonderful lecture. So I think from the point of view of CEPT students, you know, one of the things that you have left behind today is that spaces, you know, are context sensitive, and terminology. You know, so because students use terminology like, I mean, we have young faculty members here, and forest, for example, you know, and it's so generalized that, you know, I mean, I'm going to recommend that students read your text to understand the divisions, and also the fact that, you know, just outside the city limits and inside the city limits, and so these are very, very significant and details that I think students of architecture and, you know, town planning would benefit from. So thank you immensely from the point of view of the faculty and the students of CEPT. I think it was wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Tridip? Huh?
Before we let her go, is our relationship to Ramayana going to change? Because if that happens, the implications for us are, I'm not saying devastating, but they are going to be transformative.
Yes, I think every century has the potential to change its relationship with Rama, because Ramayanas are still being written. You know, with our first Ramayana, Valmiki, we believe the sort of, probably started to be composed in about the 5th century BC, and maybe it was completed with Uttara and all like that by the 3rd century CE. The next Ramayana is Kamba. The next Ramayana that we have is from the 12th century. So something happened in that millennium. Well, one of the things that happened was that Hinduism was not a dominant majority religion. It was a time of Buddhism, it was a time of Jainism. You know, there were other state religions at the time all over the country. And then in the 16th century, we have Tulsi, of course, then we have Kritibasa. So Rama is constantly being reconstituted, revisioned, remade. Now we have Amish, we have Ashok Bankar, we have Samhita Arni, we have lots and lots of men and women remaking Rama. And if Rama is transformed, then our relationship will also be transformed. And I don't for a minute mean that we have to stop thinking about Rama as God, but what we do have to start thinking about is, what does Maryada Purushottama mean? And that is different, I think. It should be different for every century and for every generation. For me, I think the respect that I have for Rama comes from the fact, not that he always does the right thing, but that he always tries to do the right thing. And mainly, it goes horribly wrong. Yeah, and to me, that a man who, against all odds, in the face of all opposition, against everybody's better advice, says, no, this is what I believe to be right. He's kind of Gandhian, you know, in that sense. Yeah.
And Gandhi had this great insight, because when he was asked repeatedly to go to this site in Ayodhya, he refused all his life to go to this site and to say, this is where the avatar happened, or the born. And then he said, I have no relationship to that Rama, who's Dasratha's son. My relationship is to that Ram after whom Dashratha named his son. So, right? So there is something, and we should stop. Yes, we should. Thank you, guys. Yeah, you have something to give.